want to learn, you have to first listen.
Welcome to episode 18 of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know, a podcast to feed our curious minds. I'm Matt O'Donnell, and I want to know who you are, I want to know what you do, I want to know who feels like gifting me some Oasis tickets, and maybe if you're feeling generous, plane flights to go see them on that reunion tour that just dropped. Quick Easter egg, if you've ever wondered how close sometimes I record these intros, you can think about the fact that that was only just announced. I want to know what matters to you and why. I've spent the past 15 years as a professional bass player. That means I've covered a lot of miles and talked with a lot of people. I've found that the person deeply interested in a topic is often more interesting than the topic itself, and the bigger picture is found in the details. That makes for a fantastic excuse to share conversations with people who I think are great. On this episode, my guest is photographer and all-around wonderful creative mind, Nathan Rocky. Very exciting times around here lately. I just heard some master recordings of some music that's about to come out that I'm involved in that I will tell you about very soon. Rehearsals are going on for a gig this weekend at the Appaloosa Music Festival in Virginia with the awesome singer-songwriter Kat Higgins. I was just out of town for a different gig this past weekend. Yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. I'm lucky to have it all coming around and also to have you here with me listening to this podcast. Thank you for your support. Tell your friends. I won't beg. Maybe I'll beg just a little bit. I first met Nathan Rocky, today's guest, through episode 5's guest, Robbie Klein. Go listen to that one if you have not. Great talk. Nathan and Robbie have been working extensively together for years, and just having him around in the social circle, I was immediately drawn to him. He's a very cerebral guy, very thoughtful, very mindful, and he just sees things in a very beautiful way. He has all kinds of stuff going on, but the thing that we talk about the most here is his focus on portrait photography. Nathan has this very incredible way of just drawing out something really human and really compelling about subjects of portraits. In fact, my personal page everywhere general avatar photo is a shot that Nathan took of me just offhanded one night hanging out at Robbie's studio. I'm not exactly sure what he did, but I know that when I look at that picture, I feel like it is a great one of me, and that is not always so easy to make me feel that. I later learned that he has a collegiate background in social work, and that makes so much sense to me that his photography is very human because social work and then portraits are really just a combination swirl of being in the people business. Nathan is my third photographer on the show, and it's interesting because with Robbie Klein in episode 5 and Joseph Ross in episode 10, we inevitably get into some discussions about specific photos that they have taken, whereas Nathan and I spend this entire discussion just digging into all these things about humanity and deeper meaning and just a really mindful chat about all that. If you came here looking for more talk about lighting, you're not going to find it, but I think it's really wonderful. As happens with people that do visual arts, on the Instagram page for the show at Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know, no surprise there will be some slides of things that we talk about throughout the episode, and also just some pictures of Nathan's that I really like, since we don't talk about any specifically. One photo that will be included in there is Richard Avedon's famous portrait of Marilyn Monroe. We spend a bunch of time talking about Marilyn and also a couple other of the 20th century's most luminary figures, Kurt Cobain and Bob Dylan. I wanted to go out of my way to mention the Marilyn Monroe portrait now because I misspeak for a little bit in our talk. I love that Richard Avedon portrait, but in the course of the discussion, the ones that are in my mind are Bert Stern's last sitting photos. Those are also incredible and very vulnerable. Those were the ones that were taken just a handful of weeks before Marilyn died. But I mention that there's a Taschen book of the Bert Stern photos, and to hear me describe it, you would think I am talking about the Avedon ones, and I don't want the photo heads to come for me in the comments. Know that I was crossing up my thoughts. Also, a note on the audio. This discussion was recorded over Zoom, and Nathan recorded his end of it independently. There are some audio imperfections that I think are still better than the native Zoom audio. However, his recording cuts off just about a minute before the end, and so you will hear kind of an abrupt change to where I patch it with the Zoom audio just for the last 40 seconds or so. But I want to let you know that I'm aware. I apologize. I hope that you still have a great time listening to it because it really is an amazing discussion that I had with Nathan. And with that, I will take you now to that discussion with photographer, creative mind, Nathan Rocky. I texted Robbie the other day because I just found out about Sam Jones, the photographer.
Okay.
I found out about him through having a book that he has out, or I just ordered it because a musician that I'm a freak about, this guy Blake Mills, did a soundtrack for a photo book that he did.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
See, I love that kind of stuff. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like...
The world's connecting.
I was just hunting down some of Blake's vinyl because now I'm vinyl guy.
Nice.
I found this thing and I'm like, man, what is this? I've never heard of this before. I looked into it and apparently the book is that for the second to last Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album, Petty commissioned him to go shoot some stuff for maybe the album cover. And they ended up not using it, but he took that as an impetus to go on a couple more trips through the South and shoot stuff.
Wow.
And so that's what the book became. And then he got Blake to do a vinyl, but that music only exists on vinyl. So I've never heard it. You can't find it to stream or download or whatever. And
it's amazing.
I found a copy on Discogs for $35 sealed. And on Amazon, you can only find used copies for $300. So I'm very excited about that.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. You got the book yet?
No, it should be coming later this week. So
yeah, that's awesome.
It makes me excited. It's just one of those things where I found out about that dude, Sam Jones, and I'll get to the point of why I brought him up in a second. But I asked Robbie about him, and I was like, it's always funny because with Robbie, this is exactly what I said to him. I said, the answer is probably either, of course, where have you been or who?
Right. 100%.
And he told me that Drew Carey that's at his house here, the Drew Carey picture is a Sam Jones picture. And but that he's mostly been doing film, and that he did the Jason Isbell documentary. He shot the Smartless tour thing that was on HBO. He did the Tony Hawk documentary, and I'm like, all these things that I like are all by this guy, and how have I missed out totally?
Didn't know that he existed.
Had no idea. But the reason I bring it up is because he does a podcast, but it's in room, and it looks beautiful. It's obviously shot by someone that knows how to do stuff at that level, and it's if I could do that, then I would consider maybe doing video, but anything less than that is not worth it to me, and I would also be concerned about how awkward I looked in the course of the conversation.
It changes something, I think, when you are so for sure, when you're thinking about how you look or how we started live streaming at church about whatever 3.5 years ago during COVID, and it changed it. It was people just more uncomfortable, and it's not conscious. It's weird. It's like,
Yeah.
sometimes it is, but I think for most people, video is just audio is uncomfortable enough, I think, for some people. I've heard my voice enough where I'm like, I don't care. I know what I sound like, and it is what it is, you know? But for many folks who are not used to that, it's like, it's just that second element. Most people get on Zoom calls for business, and that's all. Dude, that's literally all they think about.
Yeah, and that's funny. It's funny that you bring that up, because I used to hate hearing my speaking voice played back to me. And now, and I haven't even had an adjustment period with the podcast. Like, from the time I did it, I was like, oh, that's great. You know, that works. And I think some of it had to be that maybe a year or so ago, I found out one of those things that I've been saying this a lot lately, things that you know to be true, but until you hear them said out loud, they don't become apparent, which is the thing that you don't hear your own voice through audio, you hear it through bone conduction. So it is not the same anyway. And so it's just a matter of when you hear your voice, the first few times played back to you, you are hearing it as audio captured, not as the conduction that you hear of yourself.
Right.
I used to have this theory that it was because people don't like the sound of their own voice because they are the only person that has to hear 100% of what they say.
I like that. That's deep.
That might still be true, and I haven't thought about that in a while, but also that it's just not the same way of hearing the voice. You know, that you're hearing it through vibration conduction, not audio.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, maybe this is kind of hand in hand with that a little bit. You're subject to hearing, everyone is subject to hearing what you have to say all the time, and then all of a sudden now you have to hear how terrible you sound, how dumb you sound, or whatever. Yeah. No, it's a good point. It's like there's no running from it at that point.
Well, that sort of leads me to like where I kind of wanting to start. You know, I don't like over prep for these. I like the natural vibe, but it's nice when the few things that I'm thinking about are the things that sort of line up the minute I look into anything. And this is something that Amanda also thinks and says about you all the time, is that in your photography, there are so many other people where you look at a photo and you see the photography. And I know that's not something that I doubt anyone taking photos is going, you want to see the technique, but like more you're seeing the way that what the intention of the whole is. Whereas whenever I look at things that you shoot, I am more interested in the person being shot. And then, you know, I went through to your website and your brief bio. It begins exactly by you saying that like your passion for portraiture captures and reveals an individual's genuine essence. That definitely comes through. And the other thing that I know about you is that you formally studied people. Yeah. What exactly did you study at like the collegiate level?
Yeah, so I got my undergrad in social work.
Yep.
Yeah, so I studied at Southeastern in Hammond. Got my bachelor's degree there, and then kind of found this crossroads right around that time period where I was like, man, I don't know that I really want to do this, in the sense that it's just very emotionally taxing, as you know, as most people would assume,
of course,
with that kind of work. It really is. You walk away from it thinking, man, like I feel like I walked out of there with more problems and burdens and different things. And there's a reality to that. There really is. So I think there was a sort of crossroads for me at that point. I was able to get into a 1-year program at LSU. In that 1-year program, man, I got through with my master's degree, and I just sort of felt like, I was like, man, if it's now or never. I was like, let me try it. But you know, it was, Robbie could tell you, it's something I've wrestled with a lot over the years. Like, I feel like, man, I went and got the schooling, I went through and got the degree, put all the time, put all the money into it, and then never really stepped into those jobs that were options for me, that were good money, good opportunities. And yeah, I think for myself, I just realized that I loved and cared about people so much, and I couldn't not use it somehow.
Yeah.
And I think it just sort of naturally, it was like, okay, I'm gonna try photography. I think I told my wife, I said, let's just see what happens for 6 months. Let's just see. If we don't make any money, we still have some money in savings, we'll be fine. And 6 months later, I was meeting people and making connections, and it just made too much good sense to to carry on with it. But yeah. 4 years of bachelor's school at Southeastern, and it was I think it was a year and a half. Technically, it was 2 semesters and a summer semester at LSU for the master's program.
Yeah, but that's sort of what I was getting at, though, is like you have sort of managed to turn what at least I see as the hallmarks of your photo work into being in the business of people. To whatever degree you are using skills of what you studied for social work, like you are like understanding a person and like where they're at, and rather than whatever the goals of working with them as a social worker would be like, you are drawing those things, those positives, out of someone in portraits.
Yeah, man, appreciate that. That's been, it's something that I've really worked hard to make sure that comes through.
Yeah.
I said a minute ago, I wrestled with that. And what I mean by that is I recognize that field is an extremely meaningful type of work that people are doing. And those guys go into the trenches every day, every week, and they work with folks. I remember talking to my undergrad. She was sort of the liaison between the school and the job site where I was working. I asked her, I was in that point of being discouraged, and she's like, I was like, hey, is this, what are your thoughts? Like, what do you think about this kind of job? And she said, well, she said something you should keep in mind is, in all the years she had been doing it, 20 something years, she said, in all the years, I probably have seen 5 people really, truly come through and do amazing. And I'm like, man, I don't think I can. I don't think I'm
going to be number 6. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not strong enough. Yeah. I'm like, I'm done. So, I think for myself, I wrestled with it because, my dad is a social worker, and he came out of a pretty rough background in the inner city of New Orleans. And I feel like he worked with guys in the VA that were homeless, and it just felt like such a natural thing for him, and I think I kind of felt this guilt, like, oh man, almost like I let him down or something, or I didn't, live up to what I saw him accomplish. He did some amazing things. Actually helped start the program in New Orleans for guys who had come out of Vietnam, many of whom were homeless. It was a humongous population of homeless guys.
Yeah, what a time. That's a whole... Yeah. That is still something that we don't reckon with well, is the way that Vietnam, what state many people came back from that in with addictions and all kinds of things. I just heard something crazy the other day about like what percentage of guys came back from Vietnam addicted to heroin.
Yeah, because there was a lot of that stuff happening there.
Yeah, because tons of that going on. And like, it'll probably be another 50 years. It's been like 50 years since the end of Vietnam. It'll be like another 50 years before we really like can evaluate the way in which that kind of went down. Anyway.
Yeah, I think for myself, I wrestled with that. And then I had a conversation with Robbie, probably 11 years ago, 12 years ago. And I was sort of in this, struggle with some of that, and sort of trying to create work that felt maybe more similar to like something what he might do. We've always had a joke that I have the ability to take someone who is like actually famous and make them look like a normal person, and he has the ability to make someone homeless look like they're famous. So that's our thing. But I think anyway, somewhere in that time period, he said something to the effect of like, man, just lean into that strength, the simpler thing, the simpler portrait, and really pulling out the soul of the person, that beautiful thing that, or whatever, side of it that maybe the average person every day doesn't see, or what people don't show. And I think certainly social work helped a lot with kind of helping me become comfortable in uncomfortable spaces, and not necessarily trying to comfort people, but trying to kind of meet them there.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, do you ever find it emotionally taxing to like really get in with someone in portraiture. And the reason I ask that is because some of that idea is the way that I think about and approach making records. You know, like I don't like making, you know, being on like the sort of leadership of a record in a way that is just going to be product based. You know, like I'm really only interested in being involved at that level with an artist where it's like, no, like I want to work with the real person and like find that like truest expression thing. And when you do that, that is emotionally exhausting, you know, because you're investing emotion in how to facilitate potentially uncomfortable things for that subject, you know, for music. And I was wondering if that's something that you're concerned about, social work being taxing in a way. Do you ever find it taxing? Like, is that maybe just something about humans trying to reach humans?
No, 100%. I think that for myself, it's exhausting. You know, if I'm documenting something and it's not, I don't know, if it's me one-on-one with a person, extremely exhausting. I think any photographer would probably tell you that it is to some extent. But I think for myself in my process, I generally don't want to photograph someone. If I'm shooting a portrait of them, I don't want to photograph them with a bunch of people around them because I need that connection to happen. And if I don't, man, you know, as any of us have as artists, we've all failed. And I've had my failures. My failures generally end up being me trying to either realizing I can't quite get there with that person and then sort of settling for something, you know, or just kind of saying, well, you know, never quite got to that point and we'll just snap, or we're running out of time or something. It can be very difficult. It can be very difficult to, especially in a short window of time with someone who's, you know, maybe doesn't have a lot of time. So,
yeah. Describe to me what that process is like for you. Like, describe to me how you sort of approach the personal side of that.
Yeah, my whole approach is this. I want someone to forget that I exist. Like, if I can make them forget that I exist, because and generally I do that by, you know, if I'm meeting someone somewhere, maybe I would start with getting coffee with them, or maybe it would start with, you know, just sitting down and just getting to know them, asking them a bunch of questions about themselves. People like to talk about themselves and they kind of and they enjoy. I think some, you know, a lot of times people have questions for me as well, and we connect there. But that's the beginning of the process.
I mean, you're doing it right now on the other end.
Right. So it's a real hustle. It's a task to get somebody to forget that there's a camera and then all of that, even if it's just a split second. And then it's also has a lot to do with where I'm coming in mentally, making sure that I think that's probably the other half of my failures have been when I show up and I'm either just not focused or maybe this is it. It's like not realizing the moment that I'm in, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Which is a music thing too, I think. And you know, so that's like another whole part of it for me is like, as a musician, you realize there's an element of performance as well. So I think, I've tried to apply some of that. I started as a musician, and my favorite person to photograph is just a random musician in a band that maybe is not always the star of the show.
Yeah.
Because I connect, I guess, a lot there. But
you should totally have gotten like a beat gig for like Bass Player Magazine. If Bass Player Magazine was still around at the level that it was, you know, 15, 20 years ago, you totally could have just done that forever. Take the most awkward and underappreciated guy in like that.
The most underappreciated guy in the band. Yeah.
I'm always thinking that bass players are weird. Bass players are always the people that I think like, yeah, you probably have people in your basement.
It's possible.
You said it back there, and so it makes me wonder, like, what are some of like your personal like how do you get in the mindset? You were talking about like also needing to like find that moment. Like, what are your go-to things about how to like settle yourself to be in that moment for something like that? Do you have Do you have anything like that, or do you like just kind of try and be mindful about the time and place and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's man, that's a great question. I think probably it's a little different each scenario. You know, I'm sure anybody who hangs out with me, they'd say, man, you need to like not just drink coffee and you need to eat food too.
Yeah.
Part of it is like making sure I've eaten something and I'm not like jittery and shaky. But I think I try and find either sometimes it's music and sometimes it's like something funny. I love to laugh. And so it's like maybe it's just connecting there and just getting my mind like, I kind of feel like laughter brings me way down to square one. And so it's like I feel like I'm coming in like with all the burdens or whatever other things are going on in my life.
Yeah.
I'm coming in like at a real nice foundation and I'm ready to hear about what's going on with this person and meet them there and kind of it's like at the end of the day, the goal is not to get someone to pose some kind of way or to figure out the perfect lighting is a thing, of course, in this particular conversation, but you're not trying to make someone do something that they're not normally doing.
Right.
You're trying to get them to do what is most comfortable for them and to be most, themselves. So there's something that inspired me, and it's weird, but that's how it is. We're weird people sometimes as photographers and musicians and stuff. But years and years ago, I was watching a documentary. I think it's on YouTube. It's probably still on YouTube, like everything else on YouTube. But it was a documentary on Ansel Adams, and he was saying they were talking about sort of his life and his approach to photography and how, he was looking at these insanely beautiful mountains and these incredible landscapes and scenes and was always sort of trying to capture them with this spin on them. And it was like years and years he would haul this massive, heavy 8x10 camera up, or even bigger cameras than that, up into the mountains. And
I've seen plenty of pictures of him with that gear, just up on some cliff,
And he was like pretty much just like a starving artist, like a failing artist. During that time, he's I can't remember exactly when this happened in his career, but at some point he realized, man, I think the most perfect thing is already in front of me. I think it's already perfect as it is.
Yeah.
I just need to find a way to accurately capture what I'm already seeing. And so that's kind of my approach. I think it's, I know you asked a question. I'll
you're
wrap
fine.
it back around to that. No. I think laughter helps me because I tend to take myself too seriously.
Sure.
And to take things too seriously.
Same.
It's like I'm down at my base level and I'm like, man, I'm good. And music does the same for me too. Kind of like this sort of levels me out, balances me out. So when I get to that point, I feel like I'm seeing what's already good right in front of me. And people are, it sounds so cliche, but people are beautiful. People are amazing. People are valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that's, my takeaway from years ago. It's like I thought of this career on this high, high level. Like, man, if I was going to do social work, that's like the more noble career. And I'm like, man, I don't think that's inaccurate. I think it is a noble career, but I think any opportunity I get to connect with people and make them realize that they're valuable and that they are loved and all of those things and beautiful and all that, I think that's the most noble cause pretty much anyone has. I just happen to have a camera in my hand when I'm doing it. So
yeah, it's funny that you say that. Like you struck a thing there, right in that, I don't read a lot of fiction. I don't, like watch a ton of movies. Like sometimes like good TV shows will get me into something, but like some of that is so much based in the fact that like there's so much real stuff that happens out there in real life that is like wonderful and beautiful and all these things. And like, I rarely need someone to invent a story that's going to captivate me. Like there are all these things now, whether it be, just historical things or the story of people or whatever, like there are countless things out there that are, not to use the cliche term, but like stranger than fiction, or not necessarily stranger, but like more beautiful, more intense. Like so many things have happened in the world and so many people have happened in the world that no one writing could have come up with.
Wow. That's great. I love that.
Yeah. And so that's why I am so like, I'm such a slut for documentaries and, nonfiction things and stuff like that, because like there's just that much interesting out there,
Yeah, I was telling someone this the other day. I was like, man, isn't it interesting just how much the idea of a hero resonates with not just our culture. Look at, like humanity, like people get that. And it's like, there's already so many great hero stories that exist. Marvel exists because of them, obviously. So yeah, that's interesting. I think there is, even that kind of makes me think, there's just so much that I think other people identify when they see a portrait, especially if it's an honest portrait of someone, and that those masks or walls are sort of taken down. That resonates with everyone because, people know what's fake. They know what's fake.
Yeah, that's right. That's 100% correct. Yeah. And no one's willing to admit it. And that's the thing. Like I was talking with someone the other day, and like, I hate to bring this up because like, one, it has been like a theme here in the show occasionally, is like with the rise of AI. And like, I was talking with someone about their fear over AI for their, like business. And it had nothing to do with much, but they were just like, yeah, there are people seeing these things. And it's like, or I have yet to see something AI that and it's not like a weird humble brag or anything, but it's just like, you can tell it's not real.
Oh, 100%.
Like,
100%.
Like it has yet to produce something that moves me, and because then he turned it on me and was like, well, aren't you concerned about music? Like what it's going to do to music? And I was like, man, I have yet to hear anything that moves me of AI created music. It doesn't do it yet, and like, yeah, sure. There are tools like we were just talking before, but will definitely be before the cutoff of like when this talk like started, there are AI tools to be used in audio, like cleaning, but like, that's just, a little bit of enabling to like give back some time. Cause I could do the same things in a long amount of time, just like scraping away at audio to clean something out. Or I could let, an algorithm hit it and get it and be glad and have more time to spend with my family or whatever, like save that hour in a way.
Yeah, I think the question is it benefiting and bringing value to your life, or is it just, replacing something that actually is unique, like a fingerprint?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
These portraits, like we're talking about, they're interesting because there's only one person in the world that looks like that. You know what I mean? It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, like I don't want to spend like a lot of time on that, but it's just the way that you said that about like people know what's fake, and like that's a glaring example, because those things are what we would still quantify as being fake.
Yeah.
But also like taking that out of it, let's like mentally assume that AI doesn't exist. People know when like a song, for instance, is written by someone that lived it, versus
good point,
something that's just like crafted. Like they can be good, and there are tons of great songs that are that way, but like, or maybe not even songs like in writing, but like recording, like in trying to like record a song that is earnest and authentic. Authenticity is like the right word there. And like people know when shit is inauthentic,
Yeah, I look at somebody I like his writing a lot is Caleb, I think, from Kings of Leon. I love that a lot of his stuff is written. I think it's known that a lot of his stuff that's written is written kind of like around like little stories that he'll either make up in his head or little, maybe some kind of little story that he came up with or saw something of, and it just prompts a lot. Even still, there's something very human about that. And I think when it comes to, a computer trying to generate this idea of like what something that's going to really resonate with people in a new way. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think so. I think it can create things that it can recreate, maybe it can, renovate a little, but it's not the same, man.
Yeah.
No
and
way.
I mean, the one thing that I always point out, like, cause it's just something that I've tried to do because, it's, who I am, but like AI can't be funny. It hasn't like figured out humor yet. I once asked ChatGPT to like write me a Seinfeld scene about something, and it was just not funny. It was exactly like structured the way like a Jerry and George sitting in like the coffee shop talking about something would be, but none of what should have been funny was funny at all. And no matter how many times I tried it, it didn't. And that's of course not to say that things won't get better or more recognizing, but like things that are authentically human probably are never gonna get worked out that way.
I was gonna say, have you ever seen the modern? I think it's called Modern Seinfeld. IG. It's their Instagram account.
That. Yeah,
it's incredible.
There are some of them that I hear, and I'm just like, yeah, absolutely. It's usually whatever Kramer's like gonna do. And you're like, yeah, they would have written that for him at some point. Yeah, that had started out as a Twitter account like a decade ago.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and talking about like people, like the observer of a good portrait, like that's the reason why the Mona Lisa is like the most notable thing in the Louvre, is because it's a great, obviously it's painted and took much longer to capture an essence of a person, but like there's a reason why we continually try and care about who the subject of the Mona Lisa was. Like that is a question that is lost to time, but like no one, I don't think people will ever stop wondering what the subject was like.
Wow. And that brings something to my mind. Like I think about, there are a handful of portraits that I have shot, and I still think they're very honest.
Yeah.
They don't feel posed or anything posy or fake or anything like that. But I will often get questions from people like, who is that person? Like they look like there's a lot of mystery still there. And I think that's interesting. I think a good honest portrait can still do that. I think that's like, say, Mona Lisa. I mean, it's
for sure.
There's a lot more questions than answers. You really don't know who is this? One of the portraits that inspired me the most and probably really pushed me in this direction as a photographer to fight for this honest thing that we're talking about is Richard Avedon.
Yes.
His portraits of Marilyn Monroe. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
They're amazing. They're so beautiful, right? But so like good.
Oh, I was gonna say there's a Tastian book out of their work together that I keep meaning to grab sometime during a sale because that stuff is fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like especially with someone that is famous, like there's these expectations of what that person should look like. I think that goes out the window.
Yeah.
Like you look at somebody, even my brain, I'm just in sort of like a little brain salad right now, but
please do.
I think about I think about Kurt Cobain. Like this dude is just like unleashing this crazy wild music into a music scene that's like big performance, big hair, big lights, big show. And he's like, I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
And it resonated with people, and it does today too. It never stopped. It's like there's just something that I think people just know when something is fake. They know even when someone's trying to be this sort of thing. And I think it holds artists accountable. It's sort of a natural human thing inside of all of us that holds artists accountable. It's like an artist you could argue that they're very narcissistic.
Sure.
I think they just feel like they really have something to say. Some of them actually have something to say. And I think a lot of them just are looking for the stage or something. I don't know. But do you know the Bob Dylan quote? Have we talked about this before?
No.
We may have.
Which one?
Where he says, okay, I found it. So he says, the world don't need any more songs. As a matter of fact, if nobody wrote any songs from this day on, the world ain't going to suffer for it. There's enough songs for people to listen to if they want to listen to songs for every man, woman, and child on earth. they could be sent probably each of them 100 songs and never be repeated, unless someone's going to come along with a pure heart and has something to say. That's a different story.
Yeah, that's it. That's the stuff.
Isn't that it?
Yeah.
It feels like, so whenever I heard that, I was like, I think that's where my heart and my mind are with photography. It's like, it's a fight too, because it is easy to kind of say, man, there's a whole part of society and probably humanity that the plastic thing resonates with too. Look at the Kardashians. I mean, they're making out pretty good, you know?
Yeah. So and there are people who are obsessed with that thing. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
I struggle with this all the time because I don't consider that thing, and this goes to what we were just talking about like, that's how we got on the subject of the AI thing, like, is that I don't think of those things as invalid. You know, they're just different, and they're just hard. Yeah. That's hard to reckon with. Mm-hmm. Let me put it this way. Recognizing that something like the Kardashians is not invalid is the hipster attitude towards it. That is like, screw everything that's not authentic or blah, 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 whatever. Like that is like the hipster ethos. But it's like, well, but I'm also not willing to write off 1/3 of the population that also thinks this. Right. I don't understand it. And if you're the kind of person that needs to understand things, as I am, like, it's a hard thing. You get caught in this like feedback loop of being like, well, this is still real, but I don't understand blah, 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 all these things.
Yeah.
Where is that Dylan quote from? Do you know?
Man, I do not know. I read it.
That's cool. I mean, I was just curious.
Now, I read his book when I was a kid. I think I was...
His autobiography?
Chronicles.
Yeah, the Chronicles, which is mostly like made up.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Go ahead.
I've always referred to Dylan as an architect of his own myth. Have you ever seen that like famous press conference from like 65 or 66? Mm-hmm. I have it on DVD. There's not a menu. There's not anything. It just autoplays and it's the whole press conference. But he's just,
no way.
You know, just messing with all these reporters. And that is sort of just what he does. You know, he has a new book out, or a relatively new book. It's great. It's called The Philosophy of Modern Song. But it's him like going through all these songs that he like talks about an Eminem song in it alongside like all these things. But it's also, I've just learned to be like, I don't know if any of this is truthful or not, but whatever it is, it's good.
He's a crazy man. I think he's
and this is the same thing as the Mona Lisa thing though, right? It's like, if you present enough mystery, like the questions will never stop. And I like to imagine that Dylan recognizes that. And so he's just like, I'm just going to keep spinning yarns, because I'm sure that I remember when Chronicles came out, that I think that everyone was excited for finally like the real authentic Bob Dylan story. And then within weeks, it was clear that you couldn't independently verify almost anything he says in it.
Oh, I'm sure it's all false or made just mythical, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like there's, and I feel this too, by the way. I'm sure maybe everyone does to some extent when they start getting labels and these different things. It's like, man, I don't want to just be, my identity is way more than even just a photographer. I mean, the camera is a lens, the same way that, in a similar way that an instrument is sort of like it's like a reflection or something of what's going on the inside. Yeah. It's like, I don't want that to be the only thing that people see when they see me. Yeah. And so I think, there's something also inside human beings where we just really want to look at someone and say, oh, I figured them out. Like, I know Bob Dylan. Yeah. Like, who knows Bob Dylan? Bob Dylan probably doesn't even know what's going on in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's probably all contrived now to a weird like point that is.
He probably is those things in his mind now. He like actually has become. Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, I do understand some of that. I'm like, I don't want someone to look at me and say, oh, I think I figured this guy out, because we're not brands, we're people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot more to us than a company or something,
Yeah, which that makes me think about something that we were talking about. You were talking about like portraits of musicians or famous people. There's something about, like whenever someone does a portrait of a celebrity and it's different from the way that they're always portrayed. Like, you know, an easy example, and this isn't like a thing, but like, you know, like when someone is willing to be like photographed ultra grainy with like no makeup on, like a woman that's like always well made up, red carpet all the time, and then like a portrait happens and they're in like no makeup or whatever and in black and white, and then all of a sudden that becomes compelling to everyone because you're, you know, it's such a simple device, but it's just this thing where you totally turn perception of someone on its head, and then you realize that like there's more to it. There's more to a person than that. There's more, you know, exactly that way. That thing you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's the Marilyn Monroe thing. She, you know, she's this perfect. She's a doll. She's just always glowing, and in these portraits from Avedon, she's just like she almost looks like she's about to cry. Like she's like, it's whatever is not, she's not showing 99% of the time. Yeah. He figured out a way to get that to that place with her, and she's just like herself. And it's interesting because it's not like while it is beautiful, it's not necessarily always happy. And I think that's, you know, that's something a lot of times I really struggle with. I think a lot of times folks want themselves photographed in their best, in everyone's best perception of them, especially as a maybe I don't mean to pick on them, but sometimes in country music that's a thing.
Most of the time, I'm willing to say.
Every of the time, right? And so I think you know, I've that can be a struggle sometimes, but I think there is a world where those two things meet, and it can be a little bit of both. But yeah, most people, gosh, I mean, you gotta be pretty brave to be that vulnerable, you know, to say, hey, look, this is what I actually look like without all the makeup, without the perfect hair, without the perfect,
riffing on that, like by me saying that when you get like a portrait of someone that way, that it automatically becomes compelling to everyone. It's like, it's shocking, but like, why don't we value that more of the time? Why aren't we always like as a whole, you know, of humanity looking for like, why don't, you know, can't we just all say,
interesting,
like, let's be vulnerable. Let's show like a real thing more. Like, why does it have to take being like, oh, I've looked at this person this way so many times, and now here's this other thing, and you know, and now we value that because we're shocked by it in some way. If we could make that the standard rather than the exception.
I think people live with the delusion that there is this perfect world. And I think that when Hollywood and these different folks that are in these places where they're seen every day on the magazine covers and these different things, it's different roles in our society, when they appear to carry that out, man, it's like there's some hope. My life can be perfect and everything will be grand, and I'll look the way I want to look, and I'll, you know, sound the way that everyone. It's like there's just no chance of that happening. Like the world is a difficult place at times. You know, I think most people don't want to see that other side. Maybe that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree with you, but I'm musing about is like, why not for that?
Why not?
I literally mentioned this example yesterday to somebody that we were talking about Linda Perry from the Four Non-Blondes, like as a songwriter. And I mentioned how she wrote Christina Aguilera's Beautiful. Like that song is a Linda Perry composition. And
wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. The take that is the like album take was like Christina trying it, and they like rolled tape, and Linda was like, nope, that's it. Like that's the one. And
man,
that's amazing. What's funny is that it's an illustrative story, but it is also a song that is subjected about what we're talking about. And like all of those things meet at this, like right where that like intersection is where the perfection of what is effective about that song is.
That's beautiful, man. That's amazing. I think that, that's really great. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why MTV Unplugged is so was such a big thing.
Well,
you know, I mean,
but to bring it to things that we've already talked about, like, when Nirvana did MTV Unplugged, MTV Unplugged had become a parody of itself because it was just bands playing the way they would normally play with acoustic instruments. Like, it wasn't anything special or different. And it took Nirvana showing up doing a bunch of B-sides. Like, they didn't play, I don't think they played a single like truly hit song in that whole set. They brought out the Meat Puppets. Like, they're, you know, like they did all these things that were counterintuitive to like what they would normally do, which was counterintuitive already to what people were doing before them. And that's why, to me, to me, Nirvana on MTV Unplugged is one of the greatest live performances of all time. Or like one of the most important.
Yeah, I agree.
There's like a list of ones that I have, which is like Elvis being on TV for the first time, the Beatles being on TV for the first time, Queen at Live Aid, Jimi Hendrix at the Monterey Pop Festival, which was like Jimi Hendrix's like American coming out party, and like MTV Unplugged. There have been others since then, because I've had that list in my head forever. Like, there are ones that have mattered, and I'm not sure that enough time has passed for me to really be able to put those on a list that way. But Nirvana on MTV Unplugged is just one of those things where like it's such a touchstone, and it has nothing to do with the fact that it's really the last meaningful thing that Kurt did before he died. It could easily just be that, but it's about all the other things. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that performance is just amazing. Yeah, it's super raw, you know?
Yeah.
It's great.
Man, I just got that book, Come As You Are, the one, like the Nirvana, like biography. That was the only book that was like written and authorized like in Kurt's lifetime, but it's like a new edition where the author has like annotated it and like illuminated a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Maybe I'll read that next. I had something like in mind that I was going to read after a book I'm doing, but especially after like you and I just having a lot to say about Nirvana, maybe that's like a sign. Maybe that's a sign that like I'm meant to read that one next.
Dude, you're quite the reader, huh? I didn't realize you were so much of a reader.
Yeah.
Your book collection is quite extensive.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah, like I said when we were texting about it, I was bummed that it just, the way the dates worked out, that I wasn't around when you were here. I mean, it's not like you won't be here again, but
right.
You can wait to.
It had been a minute. I think it had been 6 months since I've been to town.
Wow.
So it was my first time in a while. Yeah. Which is, we had the baby, so that got through me. Man, you don't sleep for the first few months.
Yeah.
I forgot that from the first one.
Yeah.
You know, they don't like sleep.
But it's sort of a blessing that you can do that though, because like that's one of the things that I also think about you as well, is like, I'm not sure what I think that it says about you, but I think there is something that is said about you in the fact that you continue to maintain residence like down in Louisiana, but like in the entire time that I've known you, like you're doing such a bulk of your work here, constantly a traveler. And so to put that in perspective and think that you hadn't been here in like 6 months is kind of crazy. But also like, what a blessing that like work has enabled you to be able to have taken that time off then and not be like.
Huge blessing. Yeah. Huge. Yeah. Because for us, I mean, we've always lived here. We were in New York for 2 years. And outside of that, I've just traveled. I mean, there were times, I remember several times where I would travel to Nashville, man, 3 and 4 times a month sometimes. I'm like, how did I do that? I was just driving and I'd come back and that wasn't every month, but there were times where I did. And it was really helpful to get the career really moving, and get just the connections, get all the friendships that were built there, 10 plus years ago, I guess now. Like I come to town and I'm like, man, I'm busy the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great, but yeah, I definitely feel like I had started to miss it. And I told Robbie, I said, hey man, if you're going up there, let me know when you're going. I'm going with you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, what are you like, what's going on for you like right now? Like, what are you working on? What's exciting you?
Yeah. So I have a project that I, kind of started, this is 2 years ago, on a road trip. Robbie and I, we do these drives down south Louisiana, which it's like Louisiana's already very south, but we go to even further south, and we went. Oh man, I forget even kind of where this was now, but I think it was more like south, like north of Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like kind of what they call, I think they call it the river parishes.
Yeah. So
it's not as much like swamp exactly in the way that you think of like Louisiana swamp, but it's very True Detective. If you've seen the first season of True Detective,
sure have.
That's pretty much what all of it looks like. Yeah. So anyway, we were doing this drive and we found this church, and it was this old, it was old and beautiful and preserved pretty well, but you could tell it was starting the process of falling into the earth. And behind it were these right behind it, there's a cemetery, beautiful cemetery. And right behind that are these just giant oil tanks. And there's probably 8 or 10 oil tanks. And I was like, man, this is amazing. Like, we pulled over and I photographed it, and it's just sort of got the ball rolling for me on this idea that, like, man, I wonder what it would be like to be here, like, on a Sunday and like see who is still coming here to this building. It's got to be a unique group of individuals, because the whole place is just like, it's like becoming one with nature again. But it's a functioning building. And I'm like, okay, as we kept driving, I'm seeing more and more of these kind of places. And it just got my mind thinking. Robbie and I, talked about it. He's like, man, you should do a series where you go in and photograph the building and then photograph the people and see, like, almost like just capture that, because there's a time frame where that's existing. And then there's a time frame where that just goes away. I think there's something to that. It's something I've been kind of really working on a lot and thinking about how I want to do it. I think there's a point for me where I like to think about it and think about it and think about it. And there's a time to just go out and do it. And so I feel like I'm getting pretty close to that time period to just get out there and make it happen. I've photographed several other churches, but still haven't gotten the people yet that I want. So
that sounds
awesome. I think it'll be pretty extensive, but that's one thing I'm working on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say 2 things to you about that are interesting. One is I don't have the physical box set, but I have all the audio from it. This label out of Atlanta called Dust to Digital. The first thing they did was a box set called Goodbye Babylon. And it was like a 6-disc collection of field recordings of rural churches, like music in rural churches. Though the most interesting disc to me of that is discs 1 through 5 are music. And then the 6th one is sermons in these like little tiny churches. And like all of that it's all from like the 78 RPM era and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's all like pre-World War II like recordings of this stuff. And
no way.
Yeah, I think that I should like send that stuff along to you, because I think it might like help like sort of spin your wheels. The other thing they did was they did a book later, and this is actually how I found out about the label. Robbie has seen this. Actually, Robbie borrowed this book from me for a minute. It's a book called Take Me to the Water, and it's all photos of river baptisms, like old photos of river baptisms.
What? No way. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think they're both. I mean, I think that's out of print too, but next time like you're in town, I'll definitely have to like let you see that, because that is super compelling to me. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention was I saw Ken Burns give a talk when they were doing the country music documentary. I don't remember if it was him or like one of the other guys on his team that was there, said the way that they do all the documentaries is they do all the interviews first. Like, there isn't a narrative to any of those Ken Burns documentaries before the interviews are done. They start to like feed that out. So
wow, I love that.
I just wanted to give that to you as some like, as like a heads up of being like, when you're talking about like time to think about it and time to like just do it, that, the greatest living documentarian is someone that like just goes and collects information and then figures out how to like weave it. So like there's definitely something there.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. I love that. I love Ken Burns. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What's not to love?
So inspiring. Yeah, what's not to love? He's the best. So good at it. And yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's a great thought. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Also, this has nothing to do with that, but I thought that it was interesting that they pointed out that when they do interviews for those like sprawling documentaries like that, they go in descending order of age because they're concerned for like how long the one about country music took. Like, Merle Haggard was interviewed for it, and Merle passed away quite some time ago. But because they knew that he was older and it was important to get him in there, they have all this stuff of him that they were able to put in a documentary that came out years after he passed. So I always thought that was an interesting thing.
Wow. Love Merle Haggard.
Like, and Little Jimmy Dickens is in that one too, but like he was the first person they interviewed because he was already around like 90 or whatever. One last thought that is a circle back around in talking about like the vulnerabilities and authenticities thing and country music is all that late Johnny Cash stuff, all those late Johnny Cash like portraits and things like that, because people stopped caring about him, and then those late records made people care about him again, and he looked old and people only think of him as this young 50s guy. And that, like, especially that video for Hurt is just so off-putting because you don't think of Cash as being old until there he was, because that was the end of his life. So what else are you excited about?
Well, something I would say, maybe to tag into all this stuff we're talking about is like, even going back to not necessarily wanting to be branded, is like, I started out as a musician. I love music. I feel like music is really where probably a lot of this other stuff comes from. And for a long time, I kind of felt like, oh, that was like a little side thing. And I'm like, man, I think it's important not to kind of box yourself in and say like, well, this is all I am. I'm this. And a photographer especially, there's so much kind of mystique around that. It's like, people, man, you guys are you do cool stuff and meet cool people, and sure, a lot of cool experiences through the years. But man, I feel like there's still something for me about the idea of writing songs and just even creating music. I've kind of made it a little project of mine the last year and a half or so to buy guitars that I thought were interesting, but maybe weren't, extremely expensive, and learning electronics, changing out pickups, changing out, all these different things, and kind of learning that. And just, I feel like the pursuit of knowledge has become one of my favorite things. Just like doing deep dives on YouTube and doing deep dives on the internet, learning things that I kind of had like a small understanding, a very limited knowledge of something, but I'm just like loving that. And so that's, it's kind of side note there, but
No, that's the thing. I mean, that's like you were talking about when you saw what the collection of books in the house was like. And it's like, that is like all I'm concerned about. And in so many ways, that's like what the point of actually finally, after years of people trying to goad me into doing podcasting, that was sort of what really did it, was being like, I don't know, this is already what I do. And like, what's a way that I can like turn it back around into something else?
Yep.
And like, that's sort of the thrust.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think for myself, even with doubling back to something we had talked about earlier, like this idea of meeting people where they are. Yeah. I think all that helps a lot. Like being able to meet someone where they are. I don't know why this is like comes to mind. The Apostle Paul talking to, I don't remember where it's at, but he basically says, "Be all things to all men." Yeah, right. Sure. It's like find it that you could connect with people. Like for me, that I think is probably, if there's any secret, if there's any mystery around how I get those images. And by the way, that means so much. Thank you. Yeah. That means a lot, man. Thank you. A lot of people don't value that. It means a lot to me. I love you guys, so I appreciate that specifically. But I think it's probably the way. It's like expanding myself as an artist, whatever that even means. Just expanding who I am is how I may be able to connect with more people. Yeah. Just knowing enough music, knowing enough subjects, to interact with someone for more than 10 minutes is important, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in talking about that, you reminded me I had already kind of forgotten. I'm not sure that I am at a point in whatever I do that I'm doing various kinds of outputs to like maybe inform each other or whatever. But what I will say is, and I've said it on this podcast a number of times already, is like, I am so big on taking inspiration from other places and letting that inform what I do with music. You know, like there's so many people that are just like all in on music and that's where they get everything that inspires them. But it's like, no, I want to be interested in these other things, like the way I am about food and like restaurants and things like that. There's a specific example I always use, which I won't repeat, but like there are things in food that have given me more for music than anything musical ever has, like empirically.
Wow.
And I think that that's true about other places too, but just like, you know, finding a diversity of like, there's something to be mined for your purpose in places that don't necessarily automatically, you know, align with what you do, you know?
Yeah. No, I get that. I think it's, it kind of goes back to that thought. It's like, everything needs to be sort of one-to-one for people. They need to be able to kind of pinpoint, okay, you're this, so you must be this, and the generalizations that happen. And I'm like, man, most of my inspiration, even as a photographer, probably comes from films and soundtracks. I love soundtracks. I just, it's like there's something that's just really beautiful there. Probably drive my wife crazy with that because I just listen to one after another. I have a huge list of them. But yeah, I think that it's important to realize we're not this sort of binary being. Like there's a lot of things happening inside of our mind, inside of our emotions. And yeah, again, to get to that soul of a person, man, I've had folks that I've gone on shoots with, like, man, they'll sort of have either an emotional situation they're going through and they're not even able to shoot.
Yeah.
They'll have to, I've had that several times. And it's like, hey, look, I'd rather them be aware of that and say, hey, let's connect. And then when we connect, it's like, wow, the images are there. But you know, meeting people where they are, sometimes that means, say, stepping back from the camera and just, hey, let's forget about this. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other.
Okay, so my thought about that was that my immediate reaction is like, well, is that worth documenting? Like, is it important to document when that happens, like, instead of pushing it away? And then I started to think, like, almost immediately, like, or is it the much more mature thing to not document it?
Man, this is a tough one because
and I don't know if there is a right answer to that, because, you know, we spent a bunch of time talking about like how to document something that is different and uncomfortable, but like in those situations it's like to be like, oh, well, maybe occasionally the answer is to not.
I think occasionally it is to not. I think there is a time, you know, again, you're kind of when you're doing this thing where you're saying I want something honest and genuine, it's like a lot can come with that. And so sometimes it is, you know, a person that is, again, it's not always like, okay, these big smiles and these perfect moments. Like a lot of times it is sort of this, I find that people are scared to be sad.
Yeah.
They're scared to be sad. Like they're scared to let that emotion sort of roll over them. But I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel, you feel alive when you feel the reality of sorrow or any kind of intense emotion, right? So yeah, I think ultimately it's good. Sometimes it's not appropriate, but I think many times maybe it is maybe kind of almost a gift that person is giving you, that they're trusting you that much to say, hey, it's just I think it's probably situation by situation reading that. But yeah, I think I definitely have seen people continue to photograph, and it's probably not the right time.
Well, I guess the thing I was thinking about there is like the hard part, I think, is maybe when it's wrapped up in business. You know, like that's the problem, is when there's like a bigger thing. Maybe the right time for documenting someone when they are in an uncomfortable state or whatever is like when it doesn't matter to a product, you know, because documenting things for the sake of themselves is more altruistic and like worth having for later.
Yeah.
Like when it doesn't matter. But if the ultimate goal is, well, we have to do this because, you know, you need to make money as a photographer, or it's for some sort of, you know, it's going to be published or all these things, like there are all these like extra factors. And probably in those instances, the right thing is to go, nah, not now, you know, which is also way more brave because it's like photo shoots aren't cheap, you know, and like high quality photo shoots aren't cheap. And so to be like, well, nope,
that's a
like,
good point.
Well, we got to cut this one off because it is important to do so. And we're going to spend that money again. Like there is such a bravery in not doing it, you know?
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I think I've definitely, I've definitely ran across folks that were maybe in those moments of like, either sort of heartache or heartbreak. And I think for the most part, for me, I've been able to photograph them, and it's good. It's good. But yeah, there's a time where you like your humanity says, I probably just need to like chill out and be there. Maybe it's a short thing, and then you're able to go back to work. But there's a massive amount of just circling back to the Marilyn Monroe thing, there's obviously just a humongous amount of trust for someone whose entire life, their entire career is built on this idea of Marilyn Monroe, you know, and then being able to trust a photographer to say, I'm going to show you what I look like when I'm not putting that on. There's a lot of trust and a lot of, I guess maybe just a mutual, like kind of a handshake on this, like, hey, I trust you that you will take care of what I'm giving you. And I feel that often. I'm like, man, I feel like I have photos that I think are gifts that people gave me. I look at them like that. It's like, it's a gift. Like I get to look at that and remember that moment with that person, those conversations that we had. And those are gifts, and they're gifts now for the whole world to see.
Without going down a whole philosophical rabbit hole, you know.
That's all I do, man. I got to go down the rabbit hole.
Every interaction is a gift, you know, like with people. I love that. And whether or not it, you know, like, and if you can like put yourself into that mindset, which, you know, I definitely don't always do, you know, like, but if you can keep a decent like little scorecard of keeping in mind that like interacting with people is often a gift, you know, whether it's a photo or if it's just the interaction, you know, in and of itself, then like, then that's the thing.
I agree with that. And I don't think of my photo shoots for myself. I get the whole experience, you know, I get the whole moment from meeting that person, whoever they are, whether it's someone known or not known, just anybody. Yeah. And I get that moment of meeting them to the time I say goodbye. That's a gift. That whole thing. It's like, it really is. Yeah. It is. There's, again, the value is not just in the end product. The end product is a result of what happened from the moment I meet that person. That's how I think of it.
Yeah, right.
Like it should be the culmination of all of that, and not just all right, now sit down here and we're going to make your picture. It's like, no, this whole thing is, if it's done right, you know, if I haven't had too much coffee and if I've hopefully had something to eat, I'm able to to get my mind right and get that and capture something special that day. And you know, there's a lot of photographers that I think are also realizing this. There's these shifts that happen in society, and I think there is a shift back towards what is genuine and what is good. And
so I see a lot of young photographers, and it makes me happy. They're looking for this thing. They're not looking for this glamorous, perfect person to photograph.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, if they can all hold on to that, we'll all be in a better place.
Hopefully.
Man, cool. Thank you so much for doing this. There's a lot to think about there. I'm going to be thinking about Marilyn Monroe and Kurt Cobain for the next 7 to 10 business days.
Excellent. That's all I wanted to know. That's all I wanted to hear. My job is done. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Yeah, man. All right. Take care.
There you have it. I want to thank Nathan Rocky for being my guest on this episode of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. Thank you for listening. Please do me a favor and like, subscribe, rate, review, do any of the things that you could possibly do to help me have a good reputation for this show and to help grow it. Grow, baby, grow. Lots of exciting episodes coming up soon. I've got some great ones taped. I've got some great feelers out there. I've got some great people that we're trying to schedule to get in when it works out for both of us. We're making it happen. Before you know it, this show will be 1 year old. I know that's like a third of the year away, but with bi-weekly episodes, that's not that far. Please consider linking up with me on the show's Instagram. That is at Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. My personal page is at Matt O'Donnell. You can look for the picture that Nathan Rocky took of me, and that one is me. MattO'DonnellWantsToKnow.com is on its way. It's just a busy season, and getting that happening just takes some time. If you want questions, comments, concerns, whatever to reach me, you can email the show, MattO'DonnellWantsToKnow@gmail.com. Show stickers are available. I am happy to just hook you up with one. Just write to me at that email address, and we will get it worked out. That's all she wrote for this time. Have a great rest of your day, week, month. Take care of yourself out there. And remember, the best answer to a question is usually another question. See ya.